As Jamie gets there we go, the presentation up. So in addition to our county as lead agency and Harris as project consultant, we also have a number of project stakeholders, including the California Department of Housing and Community Development, various other local agencies, partners, and of course you, the general public, and colleagues from other jurisdictions as well. Also, we have our project review and certification of the Environmental Impact Report, or EIR, includes the County of Monterey's Planning Commission as well as the Board of Supervisors. So tonight is a scoping meeting. It is being recorded. For participants who are guests, your audio and video are automatically off. And for you all at home, the layout of the slides and the video of panelists is controlled by you on your device, so you can move and resize that layout and components to your preference. Just a brief agenda. We're going to do a project overview very briefly, touching on the key housing element process timing, as well as project description. And then I'll hand it over to Darren with Harrison Associates, who will go over the CEQA process in particular, CEQA being the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, talking about the scope of the programmatic EIR schedule, and then we'll move on at the end back to the county and listening to you all for comments and questions. So I just want to provide a brief overview of what the housing element planning document and process are. So the housing element, it's the primary planning document for the county to be able to meet its housing needs for its residents in unincorporated Monterey County at all income levels. The housing elements are required by the state to be updated every 8 years. We are in the 6th cycle update right now. The County Board of Supervisors met, and in considering the housing element in line with the board's strategic initiative, they took action to support these general broad goals for our housing element, meeting the housing needs of residents and the workforce of Monterey County, combating housing discrimination and affirmatively furthering fair housing, ensuring efficient use of land to provide for housing for our communities, and implementing a meaningful inclusive process, which we thank all of you for being here as a part of that inclusive process. So hopefully you all have been involved with the development of that draft housing element, which we did submit on August 19th to the California State Housing and Community Development Department for their first 90-day review period. We do expect to hear back from the state by November 19th. Today's meeting and where we're at in the process is kicking off our programmatic environmental impact report with the release of our notice of preparation and the scoping meeting, where we are receiving written comments through November 20th on the scope of the EIR. From there, we'll move forward, continuing the development of the housing element, the draft EIR. We'll be submitting for a second round of reviews for California State HCD in the winter of going into the end of this year into 2025, and looking hopefully by summer or late summer to be certified, have a certified environmental document and certified housing element. And the one thing is this EIR scoping, just want to emphasize it's not an opportunity, it's not the time to weigh in on the content of what's in the draft housing element, but instead the opportunity to comment on what is included as part of the environmental analysis of that housing element. So recapping, the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, or RHNA, is a state-mandated process that determines the number of housing units that each region, and therefore each jurisdiction, must plan for to accommodate housing demand across all income levels for the 8-year planning cycle. So as shown in this slide, for the 6th cycle period, the total RHNA allocation for the county is 3,326 units, split up between about 1,000 units for extremely low and very low income residents and households. About 700 of that total for low income, 420 units for moderate income households, and then the balance of 1,136 to above moderate, or generally what we would refer to as market rate households. So in order for the county to meet its state requirements and ensure that we plan sufficiently for the required RHNA units, we've identified sufficient opportunity sites and estimated the unit counts of those sites, plus a buffer that is included in the draft housing element that we submitted and is currently under review by the State Housing and Community Development. So as shown in this slide, while we're planning in order to plan sufficiently for over an 8-year period for the 3,326 RHNA count that we need to achieve, the county has provided for the housing inventory and credits considered in the element to exceed the required RHNA, creating a surplus across all income levels. We seem to be missing a slide. There it is. So this slide shows the number of total sites and the total units assigned to amongst the 9 planning areas in the unincorporated portion of the county, which demonstrates the county's ability to reasonably accommodate our RHNA units plus its buffer. So we have planned for a total of 56 opportunity sites for a total of 4,479 housing units. The balance of our units come from already entitled projects and an estimate of accessory dwelling units based on past permitting for ADUs. So the focus of the programmatic EIR analysis is on the physical environmental impacts caused by the reasonable foreseeable uses resulting from this proposed project or our housing element. So we will consider the types of uses and intensities permitted under the new zoning designation at a programmatic level. And we'll talk a little bit more about zoning and other policies shortly. So therefore, the programmatic EIR is going to evaluate the impacts of allowing the development of up to 4,479 new housing units across 56 opportunity sites in 9 planning areas throughout unincorporated Monterey County. Although the notice of preparation included figures showing the locations of the entitled and proposed projects, those sites are pipeline sites for which the county has already accepted development applications and or conducted a separate environmental analysis. So they won't be included as a part of this programmatic analysis, just the opportunity sites that we've identified. So therefore, these would not be impacted by the outcome of the housing element update, and their impacts would only be addressed indirectly. So we do encourage you to please review the draft housing element for the specific sites, locations, and units assumptions that accompany these opportunity sites in the county. Next slide. So as an overview, in addition to identifying both projects, housing projects in our pipeline that are likely to be built, our opportunity sites where we are looking to see housing development over the 8-year planning cycle, the county was also required to develop its housing programs and policies to address a number of the constraints that have inhibited housing growth locally. So we will be looking at non-governmental constraints such as land costs, construction costs, just general lack of affordable housing funding. Governmental constraints, which include our land use policies, our urban growth boundary agreements, development fees, entitlement permit process, infrastructure, and other land use element policies. There are also a number of environmental constraints such as flooding hazards, fire threat, which is high for 80% of the county, culturally and tribal sensitive protective areas throughout the county, and then of course prior drought conditions, and then also accommodating zoning for a variety of housing types to meet a variety of income levels across the county. So I, again, will point everyone to take the time and look at the draft housing element. For more details, and specifically for our housing programs and policies, those are detailed in Chapter 8 of our housing element. I'm just going to highlight a few key elements in particular that for today's meeting. So one, we're going to be looking at zoning, upzoning, rezoning. So we're going to be looking at zoning for opportunity sites to accommodate up to 20 units per acre if a site is on septic or on site wastewater treatment, and up to 30 units per acre if the site's on sewer. The draft plan includes allowing developing objective design standards across the county, also allowing certain by right or allowed housing uses such as affordable housing or housing in certain planned growth development areas as long as they can meet certain objective design standards and criteria, and also looking to adapt commercial and visitor zones to increase the percentage and type of housing, including employee housing encouragement in those zones. We're also looking at policies and programs to streamline permitting. So doing priority permitting processes for certain types of housing, affordable, multifamily, higher density, and employee housing. Looking at programs to potentially defer, reduce, or waive fees, both permit fees and potentially impact fees. Developing a suite of incentives and concessions. So in looking at our density bonus policies and looking to meet and if not exceed state law for those density bonus policies, as well as developing and publishing a comprehensive list of incentives and concessions available to developers, both nonprofit and for-profit developers for housing. We're looking to align with or exceed state law for a number of state laws, including development of housing, in particular affordable housing on religious organization and nonprofit college-owned properties. Looking at Senate Bill 9, lot splits, additional housing units, SB or Senate Bill 35, streamlining our procedures. We're updating our accessory dwelling unit and junior accessory dwelling unit regulations, as well as looking at taking advantage of the Surplus Lands Act. And then, of course, we'll be collaborating and including policies to address key resource or infrastructure constraints, including collaborating with water resources agencies, incorporating energy efficiency measures in our housing policies, and also looking and prioritizing community and infrastructure planning in key areas.
This update to the general plan for the 6th cycle housing element will also require amendments to other components of the county's adopted plans and zoning code, as noted in the slide. Various additional approvals will also be included as necessary to implement the element and ensure compliance with the applicable state law. I do want to note here that the county is currently preparing a comprehensive update to their existing safety element and a new element for a new environmental justice element. The appropriate CEQA documents for these elements will be determined at a later date, and these are not included in the program EIR or this project description. So the purpose of CEQA is fivefold. We are to disclose potential significant environmental effects of the housing element update, identify ways to avoid or reduce adverse environmental effects, consider feasible alternatives to the housing element update, foster interagency coordination and review of our projects, and enhance public participation in the planning process. We'll address the first three purposes through the preparation of the draft program EIR, also known as a PEIR, and the later two through the notice of preparation and scoping process prior to preparation of that draft PEIR. And then again, once the draft PEIR is complete. The overall EIR process will be covered in a later slide. The CEQA process began with the preparation of the notice of preparation. The NOP and environmental scoping supplement was released on October 21st, and the 30-day public review and comment period will end on November 20th. The county distributed the NOP to the state clearinghouse. We made it available on the county's website and at 4 library branches throughout the county, and on the county's Housing and Community Development Department and at the county community development department office. The county also emailed and direct mailed to various public agencies and interested parties as well. This slide shows an overview of the program EIR process. As mentioned in the previous slide, the county prepared the NOP and environmental scoping supplement and distributed to various agencies and to the public for input. We are conducting the NOP scoping meeting now, and the next step is to begin preparation of the draft program EIR. Once the draft PEIR is complete, a notice of availability will be prepared, notifying that the draft PEIR has been prepared and that it will be available for a 45-day public review period. Comments on the draft PEIR will be collected and responses will be provided as part of the final program EIR. The final PEIR will be posted on the county website. Additional public participation opportunities will be available at the Planning Commission for a recommendation and the Board of Supervisors hearing where they will consider the project. If the final program EIR is certified by the Board of Supervisors, then we will file what's called a notice of determination. This is filed with the county clerk and the state clearinghouse, and what it does is it starts a 30-day statute of limitations to file a legal challenge against the project. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to provide a description of the proposed project and to solicit comments to determine the scope of the program EIR. As mentioned before, the scoping period is for 30 days. It began on October 21st and it will end on November 20th. The environmental analysis to be addressed in the program EIR will be determined by the comments we received during this NOP scoping period and the comments we received tonight from both responsible agencies and the public. Agency and public comments should, at a minimum, identify significant environmental issues with the project, reasonable alternatives that we might consider, and ways to mitigate impacts of the project. Community members attending this scoping meeting and making verbal comments should also submit your comments in writing. The main reason is we don't want to misrepresent what you have to say. And so if we get those comments in writing, we can ensure that the analysis is included in the draft program EIR. So we welcome your comments. Again, we are seeking comments on the scope, the focus, and the content that we should include in the program EIR. We're also looking for suggested mitigation measures or ways to avoid or reduce potential environmental effects. We're also after input on alternatives that might also avoid or reduce the environmental effects of the project. And again, we ask that you please present your comments in writing to the county. So this is a list of 20 issue areas that are included in CEQA Guidelines Appendix G. These are the issue areas that we will consider in the draft program EIR and analyze the project's impacts in these specific areas. So these are the topics that we have to analyze under CEQA. And this can provide a reference for providing comments for the public and responsible agencies through this NOP scoping period. Under CEQA, we also have to look at what's called cumulative impacts, which are impacts of this project combined with impacts of other similar projects. We also have to analyze alternatives to the housing element update. CEQA requires what's called a reasonable range, but this basically means that there's no exact number of alternatives. It's just what makes sense to analyze and reduce effects of the project. We have to look at what's called a no project alternative under CEQA, which is what it might look like if the county does not adopt the housing element update. We'll review all of your comments during the scoping period and develop alternatives, mitigation, and form our analysis with your considerations in mind as we draft the program EIR. Okay, and just to recap, the notice of preparation again was published October 21st, and the period closes November 20th. We anticipate that public review of the draft program EIR will occur at some point in spring of 2025. We estimate that the responses to comments and the final program EIR will be available spring to summer of 2025. And then we're estimating a planning commission in late summer of 2025 and the final program EIR and the Board of Supervisors hearing also late summer of 2025. Before I turn it back over to the county, just by way of reminder, that we're going to accept comments in the order that they're received here. We are all available to answer questions about the CEQA process for this project. And then we ask too that you focus comments on environmental issues or concerns, as well as reasonable alternatives and mitigation measures. And I believe we're planning for about a minute and a half each, just to hear from everybody.
Thanks, Darren. And I think just looking at our group size, I think if we could just plan on allowing 3 minutes for each comment, and then we will continue with reasonable, if that's based on how many participants we have. So we'll just plan on 3 minutes for comments. All right, next slide. So for individuals that may be joining us via Zoom, but on the phone, in order to raise your hand, you can, and indicate you'd like to speak, you can press *9 to raise your hand, as well as *9 to put it back down. You can listen for the message of the host would like to unmute your microphone. You can press *6 to unmute, and then *6 to remute when you're done with your comment. For individuals who are joining, which it looks like I think everybody is, via Zoom, via the Zoom platform on your computer. Next slide, please. So at the bottom of the Zoom screen, you can look for the raise hand function to raise your hand to get put in the queue to speak. And then when it's your turn, the host will prompt you to unmute your microphone. You need to select to unmute yourself and go ahead and provide your comment at that time. So with that, I will just one more time flag the timeline that we want to receive your comments are November 20th. We welcome your comments and any questions today that you may have, but we also ask that you submit written comments for the record, as well as to ensure that we can more properly understand, assess, and respond to those comments. You can email your comments to ceqacomments@countyofmonterey.gov, or you can mail a hard copy to the County of Monterey's Housing and Community Development Department, attention Jamie Guthrie, at the address shown on your screen. I want to let folks know that all of the documents are available, the notice of preparation, as well as the draft housing element that's been submitted to the state, either by scanning the QR code that's on your screen or visiting www.countyofmonterey.gov/general plan updates. And that will take you to our main landing page, and you can access all of that. And if you do have general questions or feedback, the contact information for Jamie, our lead planner on this, is at the bottom of the screen here. And the email is general plan updates. But again, please submit your CEQA comments to the CEQA comments email. And with that, we are going to turn it over. We'll get our timer queue up for 3 minutes. I'm not sure who's running our timer. And then we will look to turn it over to comments and or questions if there's technical or clarification questions that you have about the EIR scope. And with that, I will start with, we have a hand up from Karen Cameron.
Can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Okay. Well, I have much to say. I'll see what I can say in 3 minutes. I'm one of the few public, as you would note on the record here. I see 13 participants, 6 of which are co hosts to this meeting, which means possibly 7 people, Craig Spencer being one of them on the Planning Commission. So you have half a dozen people from the county. And once again, this is another example of how I learned of this last minute through the Monterey County Weekly. Yes, you're doing your check off the checklist for the Brown Act, but the public participation or lack of it is very clear. And this is the first I'm hearing of this meeting, even though I'm one of the ones who's tried to stay on top of things. I was personally there when the Board of Supervisors went back and forth with a shell game. Board of Supervisors, Planning Commission, Board of Supervisors, I was there. And Board of Supervisors finalized their county plan in a time frame where we cannot qualify for state grants because it was so sadly, pathetically late. And at the same day that the city council was in Salinas, which is 40% of the county population, I might remind you, they were swearing in their city council member. So I literally went from one meeting to another, back and forth, telling the city council, you should go home and watch your Zoom because this is what's going down with the Planning Commission. Meanwhile, just to focus on Salinas alone, there were 10 opportunity sites originally. They went back to 6. Whole shell game. One guy came in there, the owner of sites 5 and 6, Bolton Knolls, and made a statement that if you don't make a deal with me, I'll go to the city. And they came back and they put him back in. So there's a lot of shell game, pre-planning, pre-dealing, handshaking going on, evidently. And my primary concerns with the environment, since that's your focus for tonight, and my time's running out, is throughout the county, I saw a lot of things being just completely blatantly ignored. No pre-approval of CEQA or anything else. And in Salinas, we're losing agricultural land. The owner of those 5 and 6 sites was saying, well, it doesn't matter because this land's already been over farmed, so we may as well put housing there. And no one holds this landowner accountable for their stewardship of the land. We're just ready to move on to a plan. And then it bothers me that only 20% approximately is going to go for those who truly need it. Because we talk a lot about affordable housing and the need, but 80% of it is going to go to developers making money off at market value raised housing. So I could go on and on about the concerns throughout the county. One of many sites I might point out was I was kind of appalled that they're going to take the Aguajito Road area just on the left side of the Chomp roundabout, and they're going to put, I think it's over 400 units right there, tearing up that habitat. So no one wants to talk about habitat destruction. No one wants to talk about how we've been stewards over the environment thus far. We're just going to slap a whole lot of housing down, and it's a whole lot of profit going on behind it. Now, Chair Church made a comment because that's his area.
Karen, you have your time is up, but if you would like to finish what you're
yeah, just like to finish this one point.
No
Chair
problem.
Church made a comment that in his area, he's received many calls in Bolton Knolls that there are dust and drift problems because it's created a flood zone because of the over farming, and they've put new dirt down to try to get one more piece of lettuce. So enough said. Thank you for your time.
Karen, thank you very much. And again, if we get through everybody and we have time, we're happy to stay on for including. I'm looking at the participants right now, and I am not seeing any other hands. I invite anyone who's joining us. If you've taken the time to join, please feel free to also take the time and share any comments or any clarifying questions about the process or the programmatic EIR that you may have. All right, I'm seeing no hands going up. That's going to make for a very short meeting tonight. So I'm going to give everyone another minute. If you have questions and you're shy, you don't want to raise your hand, you can also drop them in the chat for us. We're happy to respond to chat or capture any comments you might want to drop in the chat. Maybe while we're doing that, since I don't see any hands going up, Jamie, you can put the final slide, the thank you slide that has the QR code, the website, and comment submittal procedures. So seeing no hands going up, seeing no comments, I will just point everyone to the information that's on your screen. That is the presentation that we had for you tonight. We're here to listen to you if you want to contribute more. Otherwise, I think we have just a very short evening meeting on a very short November evening. And we've got Craig, our director, Spencer, who's raising his hand. Craig, please share. You should be able
Thanks.
to. There you go.
I just to kind of keep the conversation moving for a minute, can you explain how programmatic environmental review works when it comes to development of properties at that future phase?
Sure. Yeah, I can start on that, Craig. So a programmatic environmental impact report is a CEQA document where we, to Craig's point, we have sort of information at a programmatic level, at a higher level. So we are what we're doing is changing zoning, changing some designation and other codes, developing policies for implementation of the housing element. But what's not before us is actual specific project development. That will occur later under this programmatic environmental impact report. And what the program EIR does is it evaluates cumulative and other impacts at a high level so that when future development comes in, they can, in often cases, if they're consistent with the housing element update EIR, they can sometimes streamline if it's appropriate. But they can also take advantage of some of the analysis we've done here to streamline some of the process in the future. The county is open to and also considering ways to streamline projects that are consistent with this housing element update so that we can implement the housing element in a timely fashion as well. But generally said, we don't have project level information, and so we're more programmatic at this level.
Thanks, Darren, and thanks, Craig. That was a great point to bring up for the group. So we will be continuing. So again, we're receiving comments for the scoping of the programmatic EIR currently through the 20th of November. We will also be looking by the 19th of November to receive comments from the state on our draft housing element. Staff will be working with our consultant team. We'll be reviewing the scoping comments that we get for the EIR. We'll be reviewing comments that we get back from state housing and community development on the draft housing element. And we are anticipating that sometime after the first of the year, we don't have a specific date yet, that we will be returning to the Board of Supervisors with an update on the project, as well as with an update on the draft housing element as changes may be made in response to comments we get from the state. So if you've joined tonight, if you did not receive an email announcing tonight's meeting, please drop your email address in the chat so that we have your email address, and we'll make sure you're added to the public distribution for our housing element. And I would certainly invite, I see a couple of comments popping in. And yes, we'll stay on the line. If our public notice said we'll be here till 7:30, we'll stay on the line. And we also invite anyone here who's here, we'll continue to push out via social media and noticing in emails to help get the word out for individuals that our scoping document is available for interested individuals. And we look forward to receiving comments. And thank you. We did see an email dropped into the chat. We appreciate that. So I think for individuals who've joined, I think that's the end of our forum.